On November 14, 2025, following Prime Minister Takaichi's remarks regarding a potential Taiwan contingency, the Chinese government announced a request for its citizens to refrain from traveling to Japan, citing an alleged deterioration in public safety. However, this claim does not align with the reality inside Japan. Regarding Japan's public security situation, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan has officially demonstrated, based on crime statistics and other objective data, that Japan remains a safe country. At the very least, there is no evidence indicating any sudden or significant deterioration in public safety within Japanese society. For this reason, the travel advisory cannot reasonably be interpreted as a measure reflecting Japan's actual security conditions. Rather, it is more accurately understood as a de facto sanction issued on the basis of political judgment, thinly veiled behind a nominal justification. What then actually happened within Japanese society after this measure was implemented? Did the economic damage that many had anticipated truly materialize? In this video, we examine how Japanese society responded in practice. Initial reactions in Japan and the formation of public opinion. Immediately following the announcement, Japan did not descend into chaos. With the exception of some left-leaning narratives, most of the public responded calmly, and in many cases, even positively. Concerns about severe damage to the tourism industry certainly existed. However, reports from the field after the advisory took effect painted a different picture from those initial fears. The number of Chinese tourists declined. However, overall sales did not drop significantly. The number of Japanese customers and visitors from other countries increased noticeably. Business operations continued without serious disruption. Such reports were observed across multiple tourist destinations, particularly in the hospitality and food service sectors. On social media, posts expressing sentiments such as crowding has eased and tourist sites have returned to their original state, or traveling has become comfortable again for the first time in years, spread widely. In fact, a phenomenon emerged in which some Japanese citizens openly expressed gratitude toward the Chinese government for issuing the travel advisory. Why did a welcoming mood emerge? Over-tourism and behavioral issues. Behind this public sentiment lie two long-standing social problems that had accumulated over time. The first is over-tourism. Over-tourism refers to a situation in which the number of visitors exceeds a region's capacity to accommodate them, resulting in negative impacts on residents' living environments and on the destinations themselves. In recent years, Japan has experienced a sharp increase in inbound tourism, leading to excessive concentration of visitors in specific urban areas and tourist sites. As a result, problems such as overcrowded public transportation, increased noise and waste, intrusion into residential living spaces, and strain on cultural heritage sites and natural environments have become increasingly visible. While tourism contributes to local economies, in many areas it had reached a level that significantly undermined residents' quality of life. The second issue concerns behavioral and etiquette problems associated with Chinese tourists. This refers to recurring friction arising from conduct in public spaces following the expansion of inbound tourism. Of course, not all Chinese tourists engage in inappropriate behavior. However, it is also a fact that concerns regarding Chinese tourist behavior have been raised repeatedly, not only in Japan, but across multiple host countries in Asia and Europe. This indicates that the issue is not anecdotal or temporary, but rather recurrent and observable. Importantly, this phenomenon cannot be explained simply by the number of Chinese visitors. In fact, South Korean tourists generally outnumber Chinese tourists in Japan. Yet, Korean tourist behavior has rarely become a sustained social issue. This difference is not rooted in nationality itself, but rather in variations in domestically formed norms of behavior in public spaces, as well as in how societies correct deviations from those norms. When people travel abroad, they tend to carry with them the behavioral standards acquired at home. If certain conduct is insufficiently regulated or corrected domestically, it is more likely to manifest overseas as well. As a result, even without malicious intent, specific problematic behaviors may repeatedly surface, becoming visible to host societies as a manners issue. Over time, the lack of improvement in such behavior, combined with the continuous growth in the number of Chinese tourists, led to a situation in which those working in the tourism sector found it increasingly difficult to dismiss these issues as mere isolated incidents, even while fully understanding that not all Chinese visitors behave improperly. For local workers and residents, these problems accumulated not as temporary frustrations, but as chronic burdens. Against this backdrop, the travel advisory was perceived positively by many as a momentary alleviation of long-standing pressure. Self-economic sanctions and the one dragon structure. Within Japan, this measure was often described as a form of self-economic sanction. To understand why, it is essential to examine the structure known as one dragon, Ichijoryu. The one dragon model refers to a business structure in which Chinese capital or Chinese affiliated companies control the entire chain of tourism consumption, from attracting Chinese tourists to transportation after arrival, guiding services, meals, shopping, accommodation, and payment systems, keeping consumption almost entirely within their own networks. While tourists benefit from Japan's safety, scenery, and public infrastructure, profits generated by their spending are often not sufficiently returned to local Japanese businesses. This results in a situation frequently described as people come, but the region does not prosper. Although this structure is not illegal in itself, dissatisfaction had grown among the Japanese public because, compared to other major tourist destinations worldwide, Japan's countermeasures against such practices have been notably weak. In addition, clearly illegal activities have been repeatedly identified across the country, including unlicensed taxi operations, illegal short-term rentals, opaque or unregulated guiding services. Under this structure, a reduction in Chinese tourists does not necessarily result in significant economic damage on the Japanese side. By contrast, Chinese travel agencies, airlines, and related industries are directly affected, often suffering far greater losses than Japanese companies. This asymmetry is precisely why the measure came to be described as a self-economic sanction. China's repeated use of travel restrictions. China's travel advisory toward Japan is not an isolated case. In the past, China has imposed travel restrictions or advisories on countries and regions with which diplomatic relations had deteriorated. For example, Japan in 2010, 2012, and 2023, the Philippines in 2012, and South Korea in 2017. In many of these cases, administrative or safety-related reasons were cited on the surface, while political judgment played a decisive role in practice. This illustrates a structural characteristic of China's governance. Foreign policy and political decisions frequently and directly affect civilian mobility and economic activity. Conclusion: understanding and managing China risk. What this case demonstrates is the necessity of recognizing, as a constant premise, the possibility that political decisions in China can directly spill over into civilian and economic domains. So-called China risk should not be understood as a single event, but as a structural risk. Both excessive concessions made for short-term profit and emotional exclusion, driven by hostility, undermine the possibility of healthy, sustainable relationships. For governments and private actors alike, what is critically important is to assess risks accurately based on facts and to draw firm yet appropriate boundaries in relations with China.